Bandicoot Retrospective. Press start to begin.
The year is 2003, and the confusingly named Crash Bandicoot 2 N-Tranced was just released on the Game Boy Advance. I burp because I'm gross. Keeping up on that Crash Bandicoot pace, Vicarious Visions was put on to develop a sequel to The Huge Adventure and release it just 1 year after the first. Will Vicarious Visions strike it good a second time, or will the handheld Crash game train crash and burn? Let's find out. Starting off exactly where Crash Bandicoot The Huge Adventure left off, once again, Uka Uka is pissed off that Cortex failed him again. Instead of enlisting Dr. Cortex again to aid him in world domination, this time he gets Dr. Entropy to do it. Dr. Entropy, after peering into the future, saw an image of him with Crash, Coco, and Crunch. He interprets this to mean that he successfully hypnotized the Bandicoots to do his bidding, and makes that his new plan. Dr. Entropy then enlists the help of a brand new villain in the Crash Bandicoot series, Dr. N-Tranced, a master of hypnotism. Using his special warping powers, Dr. Entropy creates a warp portal that starts to suck in Crash, Coco, and Crunch. At the last minute, Aku Aku was able to save Crash, leading to Fake Crash of all characters getting sucked in instead. Now you must be asking, who the hell is Fake Crash? Well, Fake Crash was a character that debuted in Crash Bandicoot Warped as an Easter egg character. Naughty Dog made him as a joke after seeing this Japanese bootleg Crash plush. He also appeared as a secret unlockable character in Crash Team Racing as well. In this game, he makes his first ever major appearance in a game story. Dr. N-Tranced uses his powers of hypnotism to hypnotize Coco, Crunch, and Fake Crash into doing Entropy's bidding. Crash and Aku Aku, suspecting that Entropy is behind all of this, goes off on the floating islands to snap their friends out of their hypnotism, collect the power crystals, and collect all of the gem shards. After going to each island and breaking Coco, Crunch, and Fake Crash out of their hypnotism, Crash has a final showdown with Dr. N-Tranced. After defeating N-Tranced, Dr. Entropy tries to hide away in time, but Crash, with the power of the colored gems, catches up to Entropy, defeating him once and for all. After his defeat, the Bandicoots force Entropy to take a picture with them, revealing to Entropy and us that this is what Dr. Entropy saw in the future at the beginning of the game. Uka Uka then swears revenge, promising to bring a brand new adversary for next time. This story does a lot of really cool things that I really appreciate. I say it a lot, but I really don't expect a lot when it comes to the plot of these handheld games, and that especially goes for the handheld Crash games. It's actually really cool that Dr. Entropy takes the main villain status away from Cortex for this game. That's right, Dr. Cortex isn't really in this game at all. It allows us to see how Dr. Entropy works as a villain as compared to Dr. Cortex. Dr. Entropy works on a more, no pun intended, nefarious level than Cortex. Entropy is more focused on his brains, whereas Cortex is more focused on his brawn. This game also introduced Fake Crash into the main story, which is something I was absolutely not expecting at all. It's such a funny idea that honestly worked to the story's advantage. Another thing I really appreciate that this game does is after you free Coco and Crunch from their hypnotism, the game will then have levels where you play as those characters. I think that's a cool synchronicity between story and gameplay that this game employs, instead of just having Crash be the only playable character through these levels. I didn't expect much, but once again, the handheld game's story exceeds expectations. With all of that in mind, Crash Bandicoot 2 N-Tranced story gets my rating of an A+. Once again, this game is a pretty standard Crash game. You run, you jump, and you spin your way through all of the levels in order to get all of the power crystals. You'd think since this game is more of the same as Crash the Huge Adventure, that I would like it better, right? Well, unfortunately, this game is definitely not as much fun as The Huge Adventure. For one thing, levels in this game are much longer than in Huge Adventure, which wouldn't be so bad if it didn't incorporate the element that I'm starting to despise in these Crash games. Remember how I complimented Crash the Huge Adventure for remembering that the best parts of the Crash games were, you know, the platforming? Well, they forgot again and added a whole bunch of gimmicks. There's jet ski stages where you're trying to avoid sharks, there's space, there's magic carpets, helicopter packs, and the return of the absolute worst addition to the Crash Bandicoot franchise ever, the Atmosphere. Good God, why? Why did they do this? They had such a good thing going with the last game and they just tainted it with more crap. Listen, I might be harsh on the gimmick levels of each Crash game, but they keep consistently being far inferior to the quality and fun of the platforming that I can't help but dread every time they pop up. The magic carpet segments are some of the worst controlling and most frustrating aspects of this game, and it's not close. I can't really pinpoint it, but the level design of this game is much more frustrating than in the first game too. It almost feels like they went the Japanese Super Mario Bros. 2 approach with this game, being focused on making a harder game than Huge Adventure than making a fun sequel. One last bit of criticism I have is that even though I really like the gameplay and story synchronicity of Coco and Crunch becoming playable in some levels after you free them of their hypnotism, I wish they offered a more unique experience to differentiate them from Crash. This is where a small amount of gimmicks would be welcome. I honestly think this game would have been better if Crash strictly had the platforming levels that you would see in Crash the Huge Adventure, and then allocate a small amount of gimmick levels to Coco and Crunch. That way they don't feel purely aesthetic like they do here. I know I had a lot of criticisms here, but the game does function. It's just a fair bit more frustrating than its predecessor. I know I keep comparing it to the Huge Adventure, but I just want to illustrate how much of a downgrade this game is from it to illustrate why this game feels the way it does. With all of that in mind, Crash Bandicoot 2 N-Tranced gameplay gets my rating of a B-. There really isn't much of a change in presentation between this game and the last. All of the sprites that you see in this game are just compressed versions of the 3D models from Crash 3 and Wrath of Cortex. As for the set pieces, they are all taken from Crash 3. Ancient Egypt, the Arabian stages, the only bit of originality is the stages where you're jet skiing away from the shark. I said it's slightly about Huge Adventure, but this game especially just gives off amateur fan game vibes. It just doesn't feel like an official Crash game. The music doesn't help the game's case either. Once again, it is full of just MIDI versions of tracks from other Crash games, this time specifically Crash 3. I do give this game props for also including original music, but even those songs are only okay. Even the boss themes they have for Crunch, Coco, and Fake Crash just sound like generic boss music that you'd hear in any shovelware game. The songs that they did take from Crash 2 and 3, instead of just being MIDI remixes from Huge Adventure, now they have this weird, future-y, robot-y, sci-fi noise that honestly kinda just makes each song a little worse. With all of that in mind, Crash Bandicoot 2 N-Tranced presentation gets my rating of a B-. Crash Bandicoot N-Tranced is one of those games where I feel completion of the game is different than getting 100%. In order to complete Crash Bandicoot N-Tranced, you must get all of the power crystals, all of the gems, all of the relics, and all of the gem shards. Getting all of these items will allow you access to the final 3 levels in the game, and the final boss, Dr. Entropy himself. Doing all of this will not net you 100% on the save screen, however. Getting 100% requires you not just to get the relics, not just to get the gold relics, but for the first time ever, for you to obtain the platinum relics in the game. In a game where level design is this poor, that's not gonna happen unless you really want me to stream it. Getting all of the platinum relics doesn't do anything other than make the number on your save screen pop up. If it doesn't give me an ending, it's not required for completion to me. You may call it copium, and I would probably agree with you, but do you want these videos to come out every week or not? Let me tell you that getting the relics in this game is abysmal and barely felt possible even with all of the power-ups you get from the boss fights. Also, these power-ups are just plain bad. The Super Slide and Super Jump are used for so little situations other than to get the gem shards. I'm sure I could use them to help me get platinum relics, but they control so weird that I really just... I just don't want to learn how to deal with the jank. With what you do unlock for getting all of the items in the game, it is definitely not worth it. The last 3 levels are some of the most bullshit levels I've ever played in a Crash game, and the Entropy boss fight is annoying because one hit will kill you. It's completely randomized, and you have to hit him 9 times before he goes down. It's absurd the amount of split-second reaction time this game requires you to have on this final boss fight. Even without getting the true 100% on this game, I'd say it's still not worth completing. The completion reward is some shitty levels and a shitty boss. Yucky. Is it strange to say that this game doesn't feel like an official Crash game? Just the way it's presented, the way it plays, its story, it all just feels like a fan game. With a story that does a lot of cool, interesting things that I wouldn't expect a Crash game to do, gameplay that forgot what made Crash so good, a presentation that really is just below par, and a completion that just unlocks the worst parts of the game for you to play, Crash Bandicoot 2 N-Tranced is kind of a mess of a game. Wrath of Cortex is the definition of a mid-Crash game, this is just below mid. With all of that in mind, Crash Bandicoot 2 N-Tranced gets my overall rating of a B. Once again, it's not the worst game I've ever played, but you probably won't see me play this game again unless you really, really want me to get all the platinum relics on stream. Thank you everybody so much for watching this video, and if you like the Crash Retrospective, please like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one, and hit that bell so you don't miss the next episode. We also have merch in the description below where you can get our shirts, mugs, and stickers to enrich your gameplay experience. I'd like to give a special shout out to Andrew's Retro Games for being the most well-esteemed guest of them all. You could also become a channel member to get all of these videos when I'm finished editing them as opposed to when they're scheduled to come out. Next week, we'll be looking at the next Crash game in the lineup, Crash Nitro Kart. With that, I'm Bottles, and I bid you, my well-esteemed guests, adieu.